Welcome back to a brand new video. Today we unfortunately have a devastating one out of California. What is the devastating news out of California? Let's just take a look at this reporting from EdSource regarding California schools. And this article is titled, Fed Shutter Civil Rights Office, the students are going to suffer, by Emma Gallegos and Betty Marquez Rosales. And the article begins, the announcement of a large-scale effort to reduce the workforce of the U.S. Department of Education on Tuesday, or nearly half of the agency's staff, is raising concerns among California's educators and advocates about the future of civil rights enforcement and funding for vulnerable students. About 1,300 federal workers will be placed on administrative leave as of March 21, or have accepted a voluntary resignation agreement, according to a news release by U.S. Secretary of State Linda McMahon. 7 of 12 regional offices that handle federal civil rights complaints were shuttered, including the Office for Civil Rights branch in San Francisco, which handles complaints filed in California. Quote, there is no federal presence enforcing civil rights in schools in California, end quote. Catherine Mahaman said, who is the former Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education, quote, our country and California will effectively see an end to a federal backstop of harm in schools, end quote. While local and state governments provide the vast majority of funding and governance for TK-12 schools and higher education, the federal government handles key aspects of education in the U.S., including disbursing students, loans, and Pell Grants, funding programs for students with disabilities, as well as schools serving low-income students, and overseeing national research that provides critical data for educators and policymakers. The U.S. Department of Education is also tasked with enforcing federal civil rights laws authorized by Congress through its Office of civil rights in order to protect students from discrimination. California also has more than 700 pending complaints of civil rights violations. Quote, I don't know what is going to happen to those cases, end quote. An attorney who works in the San Francisco branch of the Office for Civil Rights said, my editorial edition, the attorney declined to be identified, citing concerns about retaliation for speaking out. Quote, the students are going to suffer, end quote. McMahon said in a statement that the reduction in force reflects a commitment to efficiency and accountability, and that the department will continue to deliver on all statutory programs that fall under the agency's purview, including formula funding, student loans, Pell Grants, funding for special needs students, and competitive grant making, end quote. Some conservative groups, such as the Cato Institute, applauded the dramatic slashing of staff. Quote, we don't know how many people are actually needed to execute the U.S. Department of Education jobs, and it's time to find out if it's been a bloated bureaucracy all along, Neil McCluskey said, who is the director of Cato's Centers for Educational Freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, before we do continue with the article and the legal breaking news, I can tell you from experience and from personal standpoint, because I went to California public schools, and it has not once been whatsoever a bloated bureaucracy, as they call it now, supposedly. That's just the Secretary of State lying through her you-know-what teeth. Just like Donald Trump. Continuing with the article. The Los Angeles Unified School District Board passed a resolution Tuesday condemning the cuts to the U.S. Education Department, as well as cuts to other federal funding for school meals and Medicaid. Board member Kelly Gons called on legislation to, quote, push back against this radical and cruel agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, I applaud her for calling on this to push back against this radical agenda. and illegal agenda, if that. The Trump administration and its allies in Congress are looking to decimate federal funding to schools, including cuts to school meals, Medi-Cal, and education block grants, end quote, Goins said. Begin quote, more threats are on the horizon due to Trump's ongoing efforts to dismantle the Department of Education entirely. We will not stand by while this administration removes essential support for students, end quote. Quote, these are not minor issues, end quote. Quote, or not quote, sorry, I was looking at there are not minor issues, or these are not minor issues when I said quote. After a student with autism died after being restrained, David Joint Unified agreed to change its policies and training related to secluding and restraining students in 2022. That same year, Los Angeles Unified promised to address the concerns of disabled students who said they received little legally required special assistance during the height of the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, before we do end today's video, in today's legal breaking update and breaking analysis video, let's take a look at some points of light. One point of light is, ladies and gentlemen, that the education announced that it is reducing its workforce by half, shutting 7 of 12 regional branches of its Office for Civil Rights. Ladies and gentlemen, a second key takeaway is California has over 700 pending cases with the Office for Civil Rights. The Trump administration has not provided details on what happens to cases handled by the shuttered regional office in San Francisco. Ladies and gentlemen, a third key takeaway is the administration said this dramatic slashing would be followed by a, quote, significant reorganization to better serve students, parents, educators, Ladies and gentlemen, a fifth key takeaway is education and civil rights advocates say that vulnerable students will not have resources when schools violate their civil rights. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for today's legal breaking reporting update. If you did enjoy this legal breaking reporting update, please do consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. A couple things you can do in case you never want to miss a brand new legal breaking update that I post 1 time a day, 2 times a day, 3 times a day, or even 4 times a day is 1. Hitting the bell icon that is right next to the subscribe button below the screen here on the right hand side. 2. Following me on my social medias that I will have linked down below in the video description. I am on Instagram, Snapchat, and Threads. There you guys can be updated on when I post a brand new legal breaking analysis video to the channel, as well as doing so with the